Welcome back. Now in this lesson, we're going to build the ChatGPT app in Streamlit, where we're going to create exactly the same features that whatever we are having in the ChatGPT. Means user will send the prompt and we're going to get the response from the GPT model, and that response we're going to display in the Streamlit app. That's what we're going to see here now. Let's get started and start building the ChatGPT app. The process that we're going to follow is a step-by-step process. In the first step, we're going to build the basic chat app. Means so we're going to store all the history, details, and etc. Everything we're going to build, or something like some kind of a layout, and then we're going to include our OpenAI APIs, particularly the chat completion API, and we'll see how to integrate in our Streamlit app. Okay. First, in the current directory, that is the Streamlit ChatGPT app, let me create a new Python file and name that Python file as chatgpt_app.py and hit enter. And here, let's quickly create the Streamlit app and run the app. In order to do this, let's import Streamlit, import Streamlit as st. And now let's create the header of my app, which is my ChatGPT -OpenAI API. Now let's save it and open your terminal. And once you are in the terminal, and run the app. Since I'm in the folder that is Streamlit ChatGPT app, let me navigate to this cd Streamlit app. And now you can run the app using following command: streamlit run chatgpt app.py and press enter. Wait for a few seconds and this will automatically open the browser and display the output in our browser. Cool, now my app is running. Let me quickly minimize this and also minimize this terminal. And here we will do the two steps. First step, we're going to build the layout, which is my chat layout. More precisely, is my chat layout. In the chat layout, we are actually having the two elements. One is chat input and second one is chat message. In chat message, we will display all input messages by user, and we'll also display responses from assistant. Okay, and this is a placeholder. It's a kind of a placeholder where user will input his prompt, his or her prompt. Okay, that's what the chat input and the chat message. Now let me quickly create the chat input and also the chat message. Let me quickly do this with the chat input, which is assume that I'm having some prompt, and that prompt is getting from the chat input. We can use this by chat input, and the placeholder name is some kind of a message. And if prompt is equal to true, means if you are getting some kind of a prompt or user is entering any kind of a prompt, and then we can simply display the message using the with statement, using st.chatMessage. And here, as I already explained you, there are the different roles are there, like user, assistant, AI, and human. And let me define the response, or the name of the role is user. This should be in small letters, user. Okay. Now let me display the user input, which is my st. I can use st.markdown, and which is my prompt. That's it. This is a very simple layout that whatever you're having. Now what I'll do is, let me go back to my app, rerun this app, and here you go. This is what this beautiful placeholder we are getting from the Streamlit Now let me type hi, and if you hit this play button, and we will get the hi here. And let me also send some message like hello, how are you? And let's hit the play button, and this is what we're getting here. Alright, the one thing we can notice is that we are not actually displaying the chat history, which means that the previously, if you remember, I typed the hello or hi, and then immediately after this I type the hello, how are you? Ideally, in any kind of a chat, we will have to store the history, means the history also need to be displayed. But however, in our case, it's not displayed. In order to display our history, what we can do is we need to store our all the list of elements or the list of chat input or responses in one kind of a list, and every time the user enters a message or getting any kind of response from the bot, we need to append all the information in some kind of a list. Now in Streamlit, we can actually do this in a beautiful way called the session state. Session state is actually the one of the beautiful way to store our information for each session. And if at all you want to know more details about the session state, I recommend to go to the documentation of the session state in Streamlit, where it beautifully explains about the session state. Cool. And I'm going to use a concept of session state, and let's store all the information or the chat inputs or history in the session state. For that, let me go back to my PyCharm. And here, let's define our session state or initialize the session state. In order to initialize the session state, what we can do, first let me initialize this. Session state is a kind of an object where we can actually store the variables and store the information in the session state. Whenever you're creating a session state, it is always important to check that variable is not present. If the variable is present, then we can simply append or display all the information into that variables. Ideally, for the new Streamlit app, you will not have any kind of variables. Alright, let me create my session state with the variable name messages. If messages, which is my session state, by default it is empty. I'm just validating that if messages is not in st.session state, and where you can have the multiple variables, and once it is not there, then you can create a variable with the help of session state, and the variable name is messages, and define this as an empty list. Cool. Now next step is, what are the history that we are actually having in the messages or session state.messages? We need to display all the messages in the app. In order to do this, what we will do is, let me run a loop, and then we will display our message in the chat message app. And one thing we need to remember, that the message that whatever we are trying to create is a kind of a dictionary. Means each and every element that is there in the message, it should contains the role as well as the content. What it means is, I'm just giving you the format that is actually there in the messages will be, first we'll define the role, and the role will be any kind of a user or system, or you can also have the role of the assistant. Assume that this could be my user, and then we will have the content. Okay, and in this content you might have some prompt or response, and similarly even in the role also we can have the user, or this could be my assistant or system. Since in our OpenAI we are actually having the system is also one of the role. Okay, so this will be my dictionary. Right, now assume that we have a dictionary or list of dictionaries, something like this. Now in order to display the message, what we can use, you can use a for loop for messages in st dot, or this is my simple message, in st dot session state dot messages, and inside this let me create the with statement with st.chat_message. And as we already know that we need to define the role of the user here in the chat message. And this role is actually coming from the messages role. Okay, so let me take this from message, and here let me call the role, and based upon the role the avatar will get decided. Now once you have this, then you can display the content in the markdown using the messages of content. Cool. That is how we can display all the history information. So this is the code which will display all chat history information. All right, so I think we are done and we have all the information. One is we have to initialize the session state, and then we have to initialize the chat history. And once you have the chat history, we have to define the prompt. And finally, this is my input prompt. My prompt means this is input message that whatever we are getting. So what are the input message, and this input message should be stored or append into my messages. In order to do this, what I'll do, I will use prompt. So this is actually not the coolest way of creating the prompt. Instead, we will have to do the validation and also the creation at the same time. So that is called assignment operator plus validation operator. And we can use this with this following operator. Okay, which is actually this kind of operator is very new, and which is the prompt : equal to, which means the assignment operator plus validation. This is actually the very new thing which will actually do both the cases. First it will assign into the prompt, and then it will validate. If the prompt is empty, then it will not do anything. Otherwise it will validate it. Once it validates, it will go inside the loop. Okay, so here we are assigning the prompt, and also we are inputting, or we are assigning some kind of a value which is coming from st.chat input message, and don't forget put colon, which means the if condition. And once this is true, and then here we need to define some kind of a message or any kind of dictionary value, msg, which is my dictionary. And here we first need to define the role. The role is, since this is the user is entering, and the role will be the user, and the content will be my prompt. Okay, and once you have this, and this value or this element, you have to append into my session state dot messages. Let's quickly do this, which is my st dot chat message. Oh, this is not chat message, this is my session state dot append. Oh, this is my messages dot append msg. That's it. This is how we can append this, and then we can display this information into the chat message, and what are the value, which is the prompt, is what we can display here. I think we are good. Now let's save it and go back to my app and refresh it. Now let's type the prompt, which is my hi, and hit enter. We are getting this. Let me type another prompt. Hello, how are you? Let's hit enter. Yes, this is working, and you can see that our history is saving. Let me type one more prompt, is write a article, whatever. Cool, this is good, and we have just completed the layout of the chat app. Now we are good to go integrating the OpenAI models to our app. All right, now in order to integrate our OpenAI app, the first thing what you have to do is we need to do all the initializations, like we need to initialize our API, and then you need to create the chat completion API and send the request and receive the request, and finally we need to display that information into our app. All right, now let's quickly do all the initialization. First, we will initialize our OpenAI API key. In the previous lesson, if you see that we have actually created a config file that is the config.toml file. In this config.toml file, we actually saved our OpenAI API key, right? Now let's copy this, means you need to copy this OpenAI key and safely close this. Now in our folder which contains the Streamlit chat app, let me create a new directory and name the directory as dot. You have to keep the dot and followed by Streamlit and press enter. And this will create a folder with the name dot Streamlit. Now inside this, create a new file and name that file as secrets.toml. Just look into the file format secrets.toml and create this file. And inside this file, paste our API key. Now save it. Safely go to the ChatGPT app _py, and here let's first import our OpenAI. We can do this using import OpenAI. From OpenAI, we need to import OpenAI. Now let's define our client equal to OpenAI, and inside this we need to provide the API key, and this API key is coming from the secrets.toml file, and in Streamlit we can access it since you are putting in the .streamlit folder. We can actually do this in the Streamlit with the help of st dot. So what are the variables that we actually created? We can easily call this with the variable name same as the file name, and the file name here is secrets.toml. Okay, just call the secrets, and secrets should be exactly the same name of your file name that you have created. Okay, now in this secrets you need to call our key. The name of the key is OpenAI key, and this is my key, which is my OpenAI API key. With this, you have successfully configured our API key. Cool. So that's what the initializations that we have to do in the Streamlit. Now the next step is the rest of the code will be similar, that we have to create the messages and then display all the chat history information. And here is where we need to do some kind of a changes. Once you receive the prompt, means some kind of a message, this should be exactly the same format where we have the role, user, content, system prompt, and so on. And here you can notice that we are actually displaying our prompt in the chat message. Now below this, we have to write the code for our OpenAI integration. Okay, let's do one thing. Let me create some few lines. Okay, and inside this, first of all, we have to do the few steps. First, we have to create chat completion API. And from this chat completion API, you will get the response. And that response we need to display in Streamlit app. Okay, these are the 3 steps that we need to do. Pause the video and try these 3 steps, that is create a chat completion API, get the response, and display that in the Streamlit app. We already know all the details now. Now pause it and do by yourself. Alright, hope you already do these 3 steps, that is creating the chat completion API, getting the response, and display in the Streamlit. Now let me do by myself. Okay, so since we need to display our Streamlit, as I said, we can display the message in the Streamlit using st.chat-message. Let me create with st.chat-message, and the role of the message should be assistant. And inside this, we need to create the chat completion API. Okay, maintain the indentation. See, all the things should be inside the width. Now first, let's create the chat completion API. And let's create a variable name with chat response equal to, we can create the chat completion API using client dot chat dot completion dot create, and inside this there are some parameters. The first thing is model. We can use the what are the model you want. Let me use a GPT 3.5 Turbo. In order to know more about the model names, you can go to the documentation of OpenAI, and in the documentation you can see all the model names that you're having. You can even access the GPT-4 with the help of OpenAI. Like, this is the model name. You need to provide this model name. Okay. Now, in my case, I actually provided the GPT 3.5. Okay, you can also provide what are the model. Let's say, let me provide this GPT 3.5 Turbo 125. Let me provide this. Let's copy this and paste it here. And this is my model name. And next thing is we need to provide the messages. And the argument in the messages is the list of elements, list of dictionaries, which contains the role and the content. And that information is actually having in the session state dot messages. Let me copy this and paste it here. Alright, now you can also provide some kind of an arguments of the model, like temperature equal to 1 and toppy n, which is the number of response that you want to get, and etc. So always in this app we will set the n is equal to 1, and because n is equal to is not an appropriate, because in n is equal to you will get the more than 2 will get the 2 response and so on. Okay, so once you got this chat response, and the next thing is we need to get the response or display this information. Alright, now if you execute this, you will get the response, and that response is storing in the chat response. Now in order to get the content, means response content equal to, you have to take the chat response, and from this you need to select the choices, and in this you need to select the first element 0, and from there our information will be there in the messages dot content. Now in order to display this, we can use, okay, let me display this. We can use st dot markdown or st dot write. You can display this. Let's say st dot markdown, and the value that I want to display is response content. All right, so I think we're good. Now let's save it and go back to my app, refresh my page. Now let's see whether our application is running or not. Let me wait for a few seconds. Let's say hi and hit enter. Okay, we got the response from the API. Hello, how can I assist you? So let me write a prompt saying that write an article, or let me mention it's a short article about South Indian food in 50 words. I don't want to take more than this, and hit enter. It'll take some time, and here you go. This is what the output that we got. Just remember that it took some bit amount of time. But however, we are not displaying the history of the assistant. Okay, let's go back. Yeah, one thing I forgot to mention here is we need to append this information into my session state. Means what are the response that you're getting, we need to display this. So in order to display this, let me go back to my, in order to display this, outside this with statement of the assistant, and here let's type the following thing, which is my st dot session state dot messages dot append. And what we need to do is that we need to append the assistant response. In order to do this, first let's create a dictionary and define the role. The role will be my assistant, and comma. The next we need to define the content, and the value in the content is my response content. Let's copy and paste it. Now let's save it and go back to my app. Let me refresh it. Okay, let's test it now. Hi. We're getting output. Now write in small article about Indian food under 50 words. Okay. All right, now we can able to make it, and also we can able to store, or we can also able to display our history of the assistant response. And however, this is good and this is how we can do, but one small thing is it actually taking some time. We already discussed about this in the previous lesson. In order to get the continuous stream of input, what we can do is we have to use the Stream API. In the previous lesson, we have already discussed that instead of using this, if we can use the Stream API, where we will receive the information in chunk of data, and that chunk we can actually process it. The only difference that we have to do in the API request is we need to set the argument stream is equal to true, and then we will receive the data in chunks, and that chunk information we can display in the Streamlit. In order to do this, let's go back to my app, and here in the chat response, let me add one more argument, that is the stream equal to true. Once you set the stream is equal to true, and also one thing you need to remember, that we are not receiving the information all at once. Instead, we will receive the information in delta, means in the small chunks. What we can do in the Streamlit, we can actually write the information in small chunks too, using the command which is st.write stream, where we can write the information that is coming from the Stream API in chunks. What you have to do is that you need to provide only the chat response to this. Our Streamlit app will automatically process this, and all the information or complete information will be there in the response content, and we're automatically writing it. So this step is not required. Let me remove this. Now once you're done and out of the loop, you will get the response content, and that should be the response content here. Okay, now what we can do, let's save it and go back to my app, rerun it. Now let's test it again. The first is hi. Okay, you should get some dynamic response. That is good. Now write and short article about Indian food. Let's hit enter. Okay, this is cool, and we are getting the streaming response, and all the information we are actually displaying in the stream fashion. That is really good and really fantastic, right? Hope you enjoy this and play with the ChatGPT app that we created. And in the next lesson, we will talk more on this. Until then, happy learning.